Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Kat is treading dangerous emotional ground, though she would never admit it, not to her family, not to her friends, and certainly not to herself. The young woman who grew up with every comfort at her fingertips, the only daughter of Nicole and Ted, has always been a master of appearances. Her confidence isn't just a personality trait, it's an armor she has polished since childhood. She walks into any room expecting to command it, every inch the product of wealth, influence, and the kind of upbringing that demands perfection. Control is second nature to her, whether in business discussions, social events, or the complicated territory of relationships. At least, that's the image Kat works tirelessly to maintain. From the outside, her relationship with Tomas should be perfect. He's young, charismatic, and well on his way to making a name for himself at Bill's prestigious law firm. He's also handsome in a way that photographs well-broad-shouldered, clean-cut, and tailored in expensive suits that say he belongs in the world Kat inhabits. For many people, he would be the dream partner, attentive, ambitious, and unwaveringly polite to her family. But for Kat, Tomas isn't the fantasy he should be. She's keenly aware of the irony. This is the man she herself deemed ideal boyfriend material only months ago, ticking every box she had once set for herself. The problem is, ticking boxes doesn't seem to stir her heart. From the earliest days of their dating, Kat noticed a subtle sense of pressure in her chest whenever Tomas leaned in a little too close, his hand lingering on hers longer than necessary, his gaze searching for something she wasn't ready or able to give. She told herself it was just early relationship nerves, that intimacy sometimes took time to feel natural. But weeks became months, and the unease remained, growing heavier with each dinner date, each picture-perfect afternoon they spent together. The moment that crystallized her uncertainty came after they finally crossed that invisible line and became intimate for the first time. It had been in Tomas's apartment, a modern, impeccably neat space that reflected his orderly mind. Tomas had been everything she could expect, gentle, patient, even romantic in a way that might make another woman melt. Yet when it was over, Kat felt nothing. Not discomfort, not dislike, just an alarming absence. Later, over drinks with Chelsea, Kat tried to explain, though she masked the vulnerability with humor. She recounted the experience with wry detachment, describing how Tomas had been sweet and caring, but that she might as well have been watching TV. Chelsea, caught off guard, nearly choked on her water laughing, but her reaction only emphasized Kat's deeper truth. Something fundamental was missing. Still, Kat wasn't ready to let go. The thought of ending things left her uneasy, not because of love, but because of what it would mean. Ending things with Tomas would raise questions, invite gossip, maybe even suggest that she, the always-in-control Kat, had made a mistake. And mistakes weren't part of the image she projected to the world. Complicating matters was Eva, a presence Kat could neither ignore nor trust. Kat had noticed, even early on, the way Tomas seemed at ease around Eva, the glances exchanged in conversation. Eva wasn't just another woman, she was someone Kat suspected of having a hidden agenda, possibly probing into her parents' affairs. Every time Tomas mentioned running into Eva, Kat's guard went up. Tomas, for his part, insisted that Eva had opened up about her own past, revealing a certain jealousy she'd felt toward Kat in years gone by. He shared the story as if it might soften Kat's suspicions, but it had the opposite effect. In Kat's mind, Eva's candor was nothing more than a tactic, a way to appear harmless while digging for something deeper. When Kat learned that Tomas had been seen in a hotel room with Eva, the fragile trust she'd been holding onto cracked. She confronted him without hesitation, the words sharp and fast, demanding to know if he wanted Eva more than he wanted her. Tomas denied any romantic involvement, insisting that Eva was just a friend, but Kat's eyes narrowed with doubt. What neither of them expected was the sudden confession that spilled from Kat in that heated moment that she did care for Tomas, perhaps more than she'd been willing to admit. But even in admitting it, she drew a line. She would not play the role of a woman trapped in a triangle with her own sister. The idea was too humiliating to bear. Tomas, perhaps sensing just how close she was to walking away, told her she was the only one he wanted to say "I love you" to. His tone was steady, his gaze unwavering, and for a brief moment, Kat felt the tension ease. The words were enough to quiet her anger, though they did nothing to settle the strange hollowness she carried inside. In the days that followed, Kat decided to take things further with Tomas, as if physical closeness might somehow awaken the feelings she kept hoping to find. But the attempt only deepened her unease. No matter how perfect Tomas seemed on paper, no matter how much she tried to will herself into wanting him, the spark simply wasn't there. Privately, she began to wonder if her disinterest in Tomas wasn't about him at all. Maybe it was about her, about the kind of connection she was truly drawn to, one she had spent years avoiding even in thought. The idea made her restless and more than a little frightened. That fear only intensified when Ashley entered the picture in ways Kat couldn't easily dismiss. Ashley's own relationship with Andre and Derek were tangled enough to be the stuff of whispered speculation, but to Kat, the complexity was secondary. What mattered was that Ashley's presence stirred something in her, something she didn't want to name. It started innocently enough: casual conversations, shared laughter at a mutual friends gathering, moments of unspoken understanding when their eyes met across a room. But each small encounter left Kat more unsettled than the last. She told herself it was nothing, just admiration, just curiosity, but deep down, she knew she was lying. The problem was, admitting even to herself that she might be attracted to Ashley would unravel everything she'd built. Kat had worked hard to cultivate an image of poise and certainty. Acknowledging feelings for another woman, especially while still in a relationship with Tomas, would throw her carefully ordered life into chaos. So she doubled down on denial. Whenever her thoughts drifted toward Ashley, she would shove them aside and focus on Tomas, on work, on anything that kept her from lingering too long on the questions she didn't want answered. But denial, she was learning, was exhausting work. And as the weeks passed, the tension between her and Tomas only grew. Every conversation seemed to hold an undercurrent of suspicion, his about her distance, hers about his loyalty, especially where Eva was concerned. Kat couldn't decide if she was angrier at Tomas for possibly betraying her trust or at herself for caring so much when she wasn't even sure she wanted him. The fragile balance they were clinging to couldn't last forever. The more Kat tried to keep her feelings for Ashley buried, the more they pushed against the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. And with Tomas still in the picture, the stage was set for a collision neither of them could avoid. Kat's attempts to compartmentalize her emotions were becoming a full-time occupation, one she was failing at more with each passing day. She told herself she could keep Tomas placated while suppressing whatever it was she felt for Ashley, but life was not cooperating with her strategy. Tomas, ever perceptive when it came to her moods, started asking more questions. At first, they were framed in the language of concern. Was she stressed from work? Was something wrong at home? But soon they edged into suspicion. His eyes lingered on her a little too long when she mentioned Ashley in passing, his expression shifting as if he were mentally filing away each slip. Ashley, meanwhile, seemed blissfully unaware of the silent storm she was stirring in Kat. If Ashley suspected anything, she didn't let on. She moved in her own sphere, navigating the complicated dynamics with Andre and Derek, relationships that seemed to oscillate between tenderness and confrontation, depending on the day. To Kat, this unpredictability was strangely magnetic. Ashley lived with a rawness that Kat both admired and feared. What Kat didn't expect was how protective she began to feel. When she overheard someone making a biting comment about Ashley's entanglements, Kat's defense was instantaneous and sharper than she intended. It was as if she'd been caught off guard by her own instinct to shield Ashley from judgment. The closer she drew to Ashley, the more strained her interactions with Tomas became. A dinner that was meant to smooth things over between them instead devolved into thinly veiled accusations. Tomas brought up Eva again, insisting that Kat's distrust was unwarranted and damaging. Kat countered with a sharp question about whether he had been entirely honest about the hotel incident. He swore, again, that nothing happened, but Kat's mind kept replaying the image she couldn't unsee him alone with Eva, in a setting far too intimate for just friends. What neither admitted outright was that the real fracture wasn't Eva at all. It was the growing distance between them. The widening gap Kat was filling with thoughts she couldn't confess. Her private moments became battlegrounds. Lying awake at night, she would try to convince herself she was imagining the tension with Ashley, that her interest was simply a passing distraction born of boredom with Tomas. Yet the more she repeated that story, the less she believed it. Ashley's laugh would come back to her at inconvenient moments. The memory of a brief touch on the arm during a conversation would replay in her mind with unsettling clarity. Chelsea noticed the shift before anyone else. One afternoon, over coffee, she studied Kat with the kind of knowing look only a close friend could give. "You're different lately," Chelsea said, her tone hovering between curiosity and concern. Kat brushed it off, claiming she was just tired, but Chelsea's raised eyebrows said she wasn't convinced. The dynamic reached a tipping point at a charity event hosted by Nicole and Ted. Tomas was there, naturally, working the room with practiced charm. Ashley arrived later, wearing a dress that caught the light every time she moved. Kat told herself she was simply observing, but her eyes kept finding Ashley across the crowd. Tomas noticed. His jaw tightened when he followed her gaze, and for the rest of the evening, his hand on her back felt more like a claim than an affectionate gesture. The unspoken tension between all three of them seemed to hum beneath the polite chatter of the event, a current only they could feel. Later that week, Kat found herself alone with Ashley after a small gathering at a mutual friend's house. The others had drifted out, leaving them in the kitchen with half-empty wine glasses. Their conversation started light, but somewhere between shared laughter and a quiet pause, Kat felt the air shift. Ashley's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, Kat wondered if she saw the same question in Ashley's eyes that had been haunting her own thoughts. Before she could explore it, Tomas called. The timing was almost cruel. Kat let it ring, then answered with a voice too controlled, aware that Ashley was listening. After hanging up, she changed the subject quickly, pretending nothing had happened. But that night, the boundaries she had tried to keep in place felt shakier than ever. Tomas, perhaps sensing the change, began making more overt gestures, lavish dinner plans, unexpected gifts, even talk of a trip for just the two of them. Kat accepted each offer with polite gratitude, but felt a growing weight in her chest. Every moment spent performing the role of the devoted girlfriend left her more drained. Eva reappeared in the periphery, never directly confrontational, but always close enough to remind Kat of her presence. She would exchange brief words with Tomas at events, nothing that could be called inappropriate, but enough to feed Kat's unease. Kat began to suspect that Eva wasn't just after information about her parents, but might also be using her connection to Tomas as leverage. Ashley's entanglements with Andre and Derek took a new turn, rumors of tension surfacing among their circles. Kat, though she had no reason to be involved, found herself seeking out updates under the pretense of casual interest. The truth was harder to admit. She wanted to understand what Ashley wanted in someone, perhaps to see if there was room for herself in that equation. The emotional distance between Kat and Tomas widened until it was almost tangible. Conversations became transactions discussing schedules, events, and obligations while avoiding anything that might ignite an argument. Yet in public, they still moved as a seamless pair, the perfect couple on display, a testament to Kat's lifelong training in keeping up appearances. Privately, however, she was nearing a crossroads. The longer she denied her feelings for Ashley, the more they consumed her thoughts. And with Tomas unwilling to let go, the unspoken triangle they inhabited was becoming impossible to ignore. Somewhere beneath the surface, Kat knew that whatever happened next would force her to choose not just between two people, but between the life she'd always presented to the world and the one she might truly want. Kat could no longer deny that the balance she had maintained between appearances and reality was collapsing. Every glance toward Ashley felt like a secret she was keeping from the world, and every exchange with Tomas became a negotiation between truth and pretense. The first cracks in her composure showed during a tense Sunday brunch at her parents' estate. Nicole, ever the hostess, floated between guests with a champagne glass in hand, while Ted discussed property developments with a group of investors. Tomas sat beside Kat, but his attention wandered toward a conversation happening across the room, one that involved Eva. Kat's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. She had told herself she was done reacting to Eva, but watching her lean in toward Tomas with that easy familiarity made something raw twist inside her. When Tomas excused himself to catch up with a colleague, Kat didn't follow. Instead, she kept her eyes on Ashley, who was standing by the French doors speaking with Derek. It was then Kat realized how dangerous her feelings had become. She didn't just want to be near Ashley, she wanted Ashley to look at her with the same warmth she offered others so effortlessly. The moment that sealed her turmoil came later that evening, when she and Ashley found themselves on the terrace as the party wound down. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of roses from the garden. They talked about nothing important: music, travel, the kind of idle conversation that shouldn't mean anything, but there was a softness in Ashley's tone, a light in her eyes, that made Kat's heart stumble. When Tomas appeared in the doorway, the shift was immediate. Kat stepped back, her mask sliding into place. She knew she couldn't afford to be caught lingering like that. Not yet. Days later, Tomas confronted her. His voice was low, controlled, but his words carried weight. He accused her, not directly, of pulling away, of hiding something. Kat deflected, insisting she was under pressure from family matters, but Tomas's expression said he didn't believe her. Eva's shadow lingered over their arguments. Kat still suspected her of digging for information about Nicole and Ted, and Tomas's refusal to distance himself entirely from her only deepened Kat's mistrust. When she challenged him on it, Tomas turned the accusation back on her, hinting that her fixation on Ashley wasn't as subtle as she thought. That was the first time anyone had said it aloud. It shook Kat more than she expected. In her mind, she had been careful, disciplined, maintaining boundaries even if they existed only for show. If Tomas could see through her, who else might have noticed? Ashley, meanwhile, remained caught up in her own complicated triangle with Andre and Derek. Kat told herself she was merely observing from the sidelines, but when Ashley's mood darkened after a fight with Andre, Kat found herself sending a late-night message just to check in. Ashley replied almost instantly, and their conversation stretched into the early hours, growing more personal with each exchange. The more they talked, the harder it became for Kat to keep Tomas in the role she had assigned him, the safe, socially perfect choice. She began canceling plans with him under the guise of work, making room for moments with Ashley that were never officially planned but always seemed to happen. Nicole noticed the shift, though she didn't yet understand its source. She warned Kat that Tomas was good for the family's image and urged her not to jeopardize the relationship over emotional whims. The words stung, not because Kat disagreed, but because they echoed the voice in her own head that had been keeping her tethered to Tomas all along. The real breaking point came at a high-profile gala where all three, Kat, Tomas, and Ashley, were in attendance. Kat wore a flawless smile for the photographers, her hand resting lightly on Tomas's arm, but her attention kept slipping to Ashley across the room. At one point, their eyes met and held for just a fraction too long. It was enough to send Tomas's expression into a subtle but unmistakable shift. Later, when they were alone in the car, he asked her point-blank if there was something going on between her and Ashley. Kat didn't answer right away. She wanted to lie, to keep the delicate house of cards intact, but the truth hovered dangerously close to the surface. "It's complicated," she said finally, her voice quieter than she intended. The silence that followed was heavy. Tomas didn't press further, but the distance between them was now undeniable. From that night forward, things moved quickly. Tomas withdrew into his work, avoiding conversations that might force the issue. Kat, freed from the constant scrutiny, found herself gravitating toward Ashley with less hesitation. They began meeting more often, sometimes in public settings, sometimes in quiet corners where the rest of the world felt far away. It wasn't a love story in the traditional sense. Kat was still figuring out what she wanted, still wrestling with the parts of herself she had spent years suppressing. Ashley, for her part, wasn't looking for commitment, but she seemed to understand Kat in a way no one else did. The climax came when Eva confronted Kat directly, hinting that she knew about the shift in Kat's affections and suggesting it could be useful to her. Kat realized then that Eva had been playing a longer game all along, using subtle pressure to keep both her and Tomas off balance. In the end, the choice was clear, even if it wasn't easy. Kat ended things with Tomas, framing it as a matter of honesty rather than betrayal. He didn't argue. The look in his eyes said he had been expecting it. Her final scene with Ashley wasn't dramatic, but it was real. They sat together in a quiet cafe, the morning sun spilling across the table. Ashley reached for her hand, not in declaration but in understanding. For the first time in months, Kat didn't feel like she was performing. And as she looked out the window, watching the city move around them, she realized she had stepped into a future she hadn't planned, but one that finally felt like hers.